Good evening and welcome. My name is Zubin Austin, Academic Director for the Center of Practice Excellence and Professor and Koffler Chair at the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy. I'm delighted to be one of your moderators for tonight's discussion on the leadership crisis in pharmacy. Tonight's event is brought to you by the Office of Advancement in Alumni Relations in partnership with the Center for Practice Excellence at the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy. We invite you to stay up to date on all upcoming alumni offerings by visiting pharmacy.utoronto.ca and following our alumni Facebook page and LinkedIn groups. You can also check out the diverse array of online educational programming offered through the Center for Practice Excellence by going to our website off the faculty homepage. Before we start this evening's discussion, I would like to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. As we reflect on this time of year, days before the September 30th commemoration of work related to truth and reconciliation in Canada, I hope land acknowledgements such as this give all of us pause to think about our country's history, our own interactions with Canada's First Nations and Indigenous peoples, and the different ways we have as individuals to express gratitude in ways that recognize both. Co-moderating tonight's panel with me is Emily Musing from the class of AT3, former Vice President, Clinical, and Chief Patient Safety Officer at the University Health Network. Emily is also our newly appointed Leader in Residence at the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy. The Leader in Residence program is a new initiative of the faculty and the Center for Practice Excellence, designed to provide students, faculty, and alumni with opportunities to connect and network with and be mentored by leaders and influencers in pharmacy. We are thrilled to welcome Emily as our inaugural Leader in Residence and look forward to working with her on more events such as this during her year with us. During her career, Emily has worked tirelessly to improve the care for patients in some of Canada's leading academic health centres. She led the University Health Network's Caring Safely initiative in partnership with the Hospital for Sick Children and co-led UHN's COVID-19 vaccine strategy, delivering some of the very first doses of vaccines into the arms of frontline healthcare providers in Canada. We are excited to welcome Emily in her new role. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Zubin. So tonight's topic will really illuminate the challenges that our pharmacy workforce is experiencing, and we'll explore ways that pharmacy professionals can practice in meaningful and at times unconventional ways while championing the leadership role of trained pharmacists to actively advance the profession as key members of primary health care. We'll speak in a roundtable discussion with our panelists, followed by a question and answer period. And we encourage that you should add your questions in the live YouTube chat. Our panelists each have a depth of leadership experience in different aspects of pharmacy, and we're thrilled to have them with us tonight. So I'm very pleased to introduce you to them now. First is Christine Donaldson. She's from the class of 92, and she also has a Master's of Education. She is the VP of Pharmacy Services at Health Pro Procurement Services. Next, Kiro Massey, an international pharmacy grad from 2011-12, is the owner of Laylor Pharmacy. Rebecca Yu, BSc Pharm of 90, is the VP of Gastroenterology franchise for Takeda Canada Incorporated. And last but not least, Jeff Urich, BSc Pharm 95, is the owner of Urich Pharmacy Limited and also a former MPP. So Zubin, let's get started with our first question.
Thank you, Emily. And to get us started, I'd like to ask each of the panelists, this might sound a little bit funny, but who are you? Why are you here at this leadership panel today? Could you walk us through a bit of where your career journey has taken you? Let me start with you, Christine.
Sure, thanks, Zubin. So I am a proud member of the class of 92. I graduated from the University of Toronto, and both Emily and Zubin know all too well that I started my career at Mount Sinai because I think it was first that Emily was my first clinical coordinator, and then it was Zubin. So they both have been my bosses. after a few years of practicing in hospital, I went on to have the fortunate opportunity to be a full-time lecturer at the University of Toronto, and spent 5 years with undergraduate students, which was very eye-opening. So went out on to complete my Master's of Education to really ensure I knew what I was doing, I guess, at the time. And then had a bit of a change of pace when I pursued some more leadership roles in hospital practice, and actually returned back to my hometown of Windsor, Ontario, where I became the regional director of pharmacy for several years at Windsor Regional Hospital. I did maintain some close ties with the Ontario College of Pharmacists during that time, and 5 years ago returned back to Toronto to take on a more national role as a vice president at Health Pro Procurement. And what we do is basically provide all the pharmaceuticals for hospitals across the country.
So what I'm hearing from you, Christine, is that leaders like you don't necessarily follow a straight line in your career, and coming and going and toing and froing across the province and across organizations and even across job types is part of your career journey. Thank you for sharing. Let me ask Kiro the same question. Tell us a little bit about your career journey and where it's taken you.
Guys can hear me well? Very
Loud
good.
and clear.
Excellent. So my name's Kiro Mase. I graduated from Cairo University in Egypt in 2010. I did like some intensive French courses in Université Laval for a little bit of time in 2010, 2012 kind of. And I also did my IPG program through the University of Toronto, 2011, I believe, and 2012. Why am I here in this leadership conference? I still don't know. I mean, I attempted my board exams like 3 times. I barely passed through university. And for the first, I would say 5 years of my career, I really hated this job. But then eventually what happened was I had to really reevaluate why I'm doing this. And what it came down to is essentially the patient and the patient experience and putting patients first. And to a very big degree, it came from a personal philosophy of humanizing the patient, giving them a sort of uplifting sort of experience when they're in my presence as much as possible, because they get objectified sufficiently in the healthcare system, unfortunately. And so it became kind of my core principle in my work to just, ensure that people are having a good time while receiving care. And it really kind of picked up in during the COVID period, where I kind of had to really think outside of the box, keep my doors open for my patients, doing everything from, being one of the first pharmacies in Canada to put plexiglass up, using laser pointers and pointing towards merchandise to keep physical distancing, rallying the neighborhood so we could start stitching masks and giving them out in exchange for donations, and giving that to food banks or women's shelters. And then it kind of blew up with COVID vaccinations and, prioritizing teachers so we can keep schools open. And then people wondering why the heck did no one think of this before? Well, it made sense. So I just did it. And that kind of attitude that really picked up in the media. We got a lot of media coverage. Eventually I became the, go-to guy for pharmacy related questions when it comes to the media, mainly because I know I don't have face for camera, but it's just that the people that work in CBC and CTV and all of these channels, they live really close to the pharmacy, and they're also lazy. So they like to just walk over and kind of, chat with me, and then we crack a few jokes. They like how the pharmacy's designed. It's kind of weird. And then
another very interesting
so kept picking up and we've become pretty well known in the community pharmacy domain as people that really care about the patient, really find ways for the patient when they need something. If a door is not open, you tear down a wall and you get it done. And that's been kind of my philosophy throughout this pandemic, prior to the pandemic, and even after the pandemic, and that's how I choose to keep going.
Thank you. So what I'm learning from you, Kiro, is sometimes
Sorry.
crisis. Sometimes crisis will lead to some reflection and a change in action, and being open to what a crisis is sending you might actually be a useful way of thinking about a career trajectory. You may be having some audio trouble, so why don't we move on to our next panelist?
Now. That's it. I'm done with AirPods. I'm sorry.
Okay. No problem. We're going to move on to our next panelist, Rebecca. So Rebecca, can you share with us a little bit about your own career journey?
That's great. Thank you, Subin, and thank you for the introductions, Emily. Of course, I'm a U of T grad, very, very proud from pharmacy school. I started my career actually in a hospital and worked with Emily as well and learned a lot from her. And then I moved on to the private sector. So a little bit different, I think, than the rest of the panelists. Most of my career has been in the private sector, and I worked started off in medical information, moved on to something called market access, where you get access to drugs. And then I actually worked in government affairs, where actually I met Jeff, and I did lobbying, which is a very different experience than, being in a pharmacy or being a pharmacist per se. And then I had the innovation bug sort of hit me, where I led a private-public partnership where University of Toronto was a key partner with the government of Ontario. And we built an innovation hub in downtown Toronto, right across from the faculty, and, working with entrepreneurs and startups, which was just absolutely an amazing experience. And I loved it. I went back to pharma per se, and I'm now heading up a sales and marketing division. One of the things I was told I need to get is to be able to own a P&L. And so I did, and accomplished that. But I would say the thing I was most proud of the last 2 years that I did was I went back to get my Part A license. So I went and studied. I looked in my books and I passed the exam and the practical, and my daughter was wondering why mom was looking at books. So I do practice about twice a month and at the pharmacy. And, it just really gets me back to understanding and remembering my roots. But really happy to be here today. And thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Rebecca. And again, that notion that people who are leaders don't necessarily follow a straight line. It's not exactly as though you're 20 years old, have this clear vision of who you are and what you're going to be, and work hard to get to that end point. Taking detours, taking steps back, taking steps forward, and sometimes going back to school and taking exams might be needed along the way. Our last panelist tonight is Jeff Urich, who has perhaps one of the most circuitous stories of leadership in his own development. Jeff, share with our audience a little bit about your journey.
Thanks very much, Zubin, and for being part of this panel. It's pretty exciting for me, and I do have to note that Zubin did entertain me as a student in my fourth year and graduated in 1995. So I broke him in as a teacher and a professor. So anybody who's had Zubin over the last 27 years, I broke him, made him easy to get a good mark from. So just
I'm sorry to interrupt you,
along.
Jeff, but part of the reason we're doing this event is for me to break the bad news to you that you actually failed your calculations exam, and the faculty needs to ask you to return your BSc PHM. Just kidding. Please continue.
It's in the mail. But
Okay.
anyways, I graduated in 1995. I come from a family of pharmacists. I have an uncle and cousin and an aunt who are pharmacists. But my father graduated in 1952, my sister in 88, and my brother Peter in 1983. So after I graduated in 1995, my brother and I purchased the family pharmacy from my father in 1996. Just this week, actually, 2 days ago, we celebrated our 59th anniversary. So
congratulations!
Quite proud of that. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. So since the time that we purchased the pharmacy from my father in '96, we've grown into 3 other pharmacies and a mobility store. One of our pharmacies is a specialties pharmacy, which provides IV admixtures and medical supplies for the southwest region of the province. But my story turned in 2011. I got the political bug and decided to seek the nomination for the Progressive Conservative Party in Elgin, Middlesex, London, which I was able to secure and was elected October 6, 2011 into the Ontario legislature, and served as an opposition member for close to 7 years. In 2015, After my second election in 2014, I became the health critic, the official opposition health critic for the Progressive Conservative Party. And during that time, I was able to pass a private member's bill, Ryan's Law, which had unanimous support in the legislation, which provided safety for our children who are attending our school systems who have asthma, basically allowing them to carry their relief inhalers with them at all times with parent support, and also having an asthma plan on file at all our schools for those children. 2018, I was reelected for a third time, and this time I was able to form government. And over the next 3.5 years, I served as Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, Minister of Transportation, and the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and served in many legislative and cabinet committees. I decided to retire from politics this past year and decided to re-enter the pharmacy workforce with hopefully an abundance of knowledge that I gained over the last 10 plus years in politics to try to utilize and maximize pharmacist skills throughout this province, in particular in Southwestern Ontario and St. Thomas, where I'm located.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'm really looking forward to our questions tonight, our interactions with the audience, so that they can get to know you all a little bit better and learn from your experiences, good and bad, about leadership and what it means. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Zubin. So I'm going to start us off with some questions about leadership. And I guess the first one that we want to hear about is, tell me about what leadership means to you. What does it look like in your current role? And I'm going to ask you to think about, has your definition really changed over time and over your experience? And if so, how? Let's start with Kiro.
Overall leadership, originally when I kind of thought about it, or when I started work, was a lot of order giving. So you were basically telling people what to do. You tell this person to do that, and then you have a plan laid out, and then from there you're just kind of making sure people follow said plan. But as time evolved, it just seemed like there's a lot of people that are not happy with this. Like, yes, employees or coworkers will end up following the plan, but they may not be satisfied, and the sort of, I guess, disgruntlement will eventually blow up in your face. And so I adapted my style to be a bit more about just showing them the purpose of what we're doing, inspiring instead of ordering. And that seems to work a lot better, in my opinion. So it went from giving orders to inspiring people to do what is right and what is best. And by keeping patients at the center of it all, it makes sense to do what is being asked of them. So that's been my experience.
Oh, I think you might be on mute, Emily.
Yeah.
Here we go. Can you hear me? Sorry. So I was just saying that I think that concept of a common vision is so important that a leader brings to any group. And as you've noted, Kiro, that common vision is stronger if it's something that's developed by everyone rather than one person trying to push a specific agenda. So I'm really interested. Jeff, do you have a similar experience? Do you have thoughts with regards to leadership and what it means to you?
Well, sure. Thanks. Yeah, very much. It's always changing for myself. It really went into high gear over the last 10 years. But I basically come down to is saying directly what is on your mind and believing what you are saying is showing that you're just not saying words just to say words, and most of all is following through and doing exactly what you say. I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, I was out there on social media and media all the time, telling people to get their vaccination. It's important, very important. Instead of just visiting a vaccination center, I was able to use my pharmacy skills and actually sign up and volunteer and give vaccinations. And I think the fact that you could come in and actually see the person who's telling you on the news every night to take your vaccination, that they're actually working and putting in the time. I think that helped lead people more so to get their vaccination. I think, as I said earlier, it has changed over the time. The things I learned about leadership is you got to have courage to make change. Mm-hmm. You can't be afraid of someone pushing back. on you and saying that you're wrong, because there are always going to be people out there that are going to be naysayers. You have to have the courage to move forward. And it's not going to be very, very easy. You have to put aside your ego and accept failure, because in making change, you're going to fail numerous times, and you need to persevere and continue. As Winston Churchill said, success is going from failure to failure without a loss of any enthusiasm. And I think that's what all leaders have to adapt as they move forward. And just having the confidence to focus in on anything that's positive. If you dwell in the negative as a leader, you're only going to spur on more failures and more negative results. Pick the positive wins out of everything that you do and accentuate that with your team, and moving forward and working together in collaboration, as Hero has made, is key in any leadership situation.
Thanks, Jeff. I think you bring up some really good points there, things to do with the importance of integrity. For people to be able to follow you as a leader, they need to believe in you. And I love the concept of the risk taking, that often it's the leader that has to recognize that there may be a risk, but take that step forward so that others can also feel confident in taking that step forward. And the realization that, sometimes things are not going to work out the way that you had originally planned, but that doesn't mean that it was the wrong move to try it in the first place. Really good points. Rebecca, I'm going to turn it to you now.
Thanks, Emily. As I was reflecting the question, I would say my leadership skills has changed, or the style has changed through the years. I think early in my career, the leadership was about delivering your own successes, right? What's about yourself, right? And I've been very, very honored and humbled to have actually many different teams since then. And with time, you realize that you need to approach leadership as a form of servant leadership. You're actually serving your own people and, empowering them to be able to do the work that you're not able to do, removing barriers, providing the resources. And it's about development and growing your team, as opposed to, it's believing in them and it's not about myself. And I think that is, a critical change as, grow your teams, and it's so rewarding. And, for me now, it's about paying it forward, right? For the people that has actually helped me, let's help, somebody else moving forward. So, I think to me, that's the critical part, empowerment and, really supporting them and providing the resources for them to actually be successful.
Well, Rebecca, that really speaks to me. I think that I went through the very same journey that you've just described. And I think part of the beauty of being a leader is the satisfaction that you get from recognizing that other people are succeeding on your team. And there's nothing that can beat that feeling, better than any success that you yourself could reach personally. So thank you for sharing that. Christine, thoughts?
Yeah, so much what was said, I completely agree with that. And I think my sense of leadership has changed over time. I think at the beginning, and still to this day, I'm more of that collaborative leader. I always want to, again, gain that the collective brain power of my team and bring together those voices and give them a chance to express their ideas and thoughts. But I think as I've evolved a bit more, I still obviously have that core, but a big part of leadership for me today is I guess lifting others up. Sort of what Rebecca was just talking about. Your greatest sense of pride is when you see others you're working with or who have come to you with their dilemma, and you're working at it together. And then you see them really take off, and there's no better feeling than that success. And then going back to kind of some of Jeff's comments, I think risk taking is challenging for all of us. Maybe as pharmacists, we have this element to us that we're not great risk takers. But it's that's vulnerability. That's the word I wanted to share. Is when you take that sense of I can be vulnerable and I can learn and I can share. It's that sense of I'm going to go before my team and explain how I coped with it and dealt with that feeling of failure or the risks that didn't turn out the way I'd hoped it would. It gives everyone that permission, right? That feeling that it'll be all right. We're in this together, and we'll learn from it. So I always again, in that positivity light, I look at the art of possible. Your leadership has to always be visionary in some ways and look at the art of possible. And then, of course, take what you learn and adjust that course. But it has to start with some vision as well.
Great points. And I just have to say that from a risk perspective, I think the people that are attracted to pharmacy tend to be quite risk adverse individuals. And that's why we want to focus on the details, want to make everything right, want to ensure that all our I's are dotted and T's crossed. That's a good thing for a pharmacist. We don't want a pharmacist out there saying, 10 milligrams, 100 milligrams, somewhere in there is okay, right? So we do want our pharmacists to be very risk adverse in many, many ways. But as a leader, I think that's where you do need to show that vulnerability and take some of those risks on behalf of your team so that you can all move forward. Okay, I think this is a great way for us to start this panel talking about leadership. I'm going to pass it on to Zubin for the next question.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to our panelists. You've sort of sparked some really interesting thoughts. The title of this entire session is about a, quote, leadership crisis in pharmacy. And that title wasn't just randomly selected. We know from research, we know from feedback from employers and from professional associations that many pharmacists are extraordinarily reluctant or will simply refuse to take on leadership roles. And there is a growing concern in our profession that a profession that cannot find its leaders from within won't last very long as a profession because others will start to lead it. And as we dig deeper into this question of why are so many pharmacists reluctant to take on leadership roles, one of the themes that emerges frequently is fear of something called imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is something that probably most of us experienced at some point. The idea that somehow we are faking it, that people are going to realize you're not as good as you say you are, you're not as good as you pretend to be. And that fear of imposter syndrome does seem to be something that is quite strong for many pharmacists. I'm wondering if each of you perhaps could reflect on your own experiences with imposter syndrome, what you did to sort of work your way through it, and maybe a little bit of advice you might have for would-be leaders who are experiencing that now, or who are perhaps afraid that they're going to experience it and choose not to be leaders. Lots there. Rebecca, let me start with you.
Great, I got the tough one first. I thought a lot about this, and showing vulnerability here, I actually I was thinking about it, identify with it. And I was even thinking from when I was a pharmacist that, one day they're going to find out. And, I started covering the GI floor and then the ICU floor, and they're going to find out I really don't know anything. And, and it was always ingrained. And I did read up on it. And there was a lot of talk about, is it impacting women more, pharmacists? Is it a diversity? Maybe it's a cultural thing. I have to be honest, every role that I've taken, I've always worried. And I always thought, you know what? I think someone's going to find out. I think my boss is going to figure out, or someone else is going to figure out I'm not as smart as they think I am, or I don't know as much as I know. And I don't have a magic solution, except for the fact that I think it's linked to risk taking. So I actually purposely always look for a role. Every role that I've taken, I've not had experience in. I've never done government lobbying. I'm not like Jeff. I've never been a politician. And I was scared. I remember walking into the room and you have all these people that all come from government, political staffers, ex-political staffers, very well-spoken, and here I am, 5'1" Asian woman who's a pharmacist background. And you know what? You force yourself. And I've purposely actually went for roles and positions, which I think makes me absolutely uncomfortable. And for me, in my mind, if I can overcome it, it's a barrier I can overcome. But this is part of willing to take that risk, right? Yep. And to get out of your comfort zone, because, I always say to my team, and I was talking to them today, if you feel complacent and you feel comfortable, it means that, you need to find something else that stimulates you for you to learn and to grow and to take that risk. And, and when you do it, your confidence build up and you reflect back and say, hey, I did do that. I was able to do that. And I can't tell you too, I was also going to add is through my career, I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, and I'll use an example, and I headed up J Labs, which is the first J&J innovation hub.
And that's Johnson & Johnson. Yep.
The person has left since. But a year later, he came to me after I did the role and he said, For somebody who was totally unqualified for this role, I guess, you did your job. So that was a very underhanded, backhanded compliment. But, I proved them wrong. And so I think that's something else too, for everybody to know, that if anybody comes to you and tells you you can't do something, you need to believe in yourself and believe in the fact that you can do it, and find ways, find mentors, find support system, believe in yourself to overcome that, and you can achieve. And, if you have a dream, you have a passion, go for it. Don't let people, stereotype you, or because you don't have a certain background, or you don't look a certain way, or you don't speak a certain way, actually pigeon you in a place that you shouldn't be. So I guess that's my advice. I don't know if that helps.
Yep. Interesting. Jeff, let me turn it over to you. You've had quite a non-traditional career trajectory, and you've certainly been in a lot of fields that many people would scratch their heads and go, what's that guy there doing that job? Tell me about your experience with imposter syndrome and what kinds of things you've done personally and professionally to sort of overcome the barrier that imposter syndrome could be.
Yeah, no, sure. Thanks. I mean, my first, acknowledgement of imposter syndrome was October 6, 2011. I got elected, came home that night and said, now what? Get going. But it didn't take me long at the legislature to sit in a room with the other 120 some odd MPPs and realize I'm surrounded by imposters. I think we have to accept we're all imposters to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. It's getting over that fear that we don't know enough or we don't belong here in order to make change. So once I realized that I'm in the same boat with all the other MPPs, we got elected to try to do the best job we could for the people that elected us. Once you realize that, it's a game changer, that you don't need to be afraid to reach out and learn. You don't need to be afraid to find your voice and speak out. Because I think I noticed that a lot in our profession. Is there's a lot of bright, intelligent, educated people that are pharmacists, but they have no voice, or they're afraid to voice their opinion, thinking that their voice either doesn't matter or they're not smart enough to say what they have to say. And I got to tell you that I've never met a pharmacist who I did not enjoy hearing their facts and their opinions on any matter with regards to the healthcare system. And we need to speak up more. I tried to deal with my imposter syndrome by finding mentors, not just one, but various mentors. I had at the legislature, John O'Toole and Toby Barrett and Jerry Ouellette, who I latched on to help guide me in the ropes to get through the first couple months as a politician and move on. And one of the best things they ever taught me is people in this life aren't really focused on you too much, on what you do. They're focused on themselves and getting through their day, which is why if we have an important message to deliver to those people, is we have to say it over and over and over and over again until we think we said it too often, and then they're just starting to get the message. And I can tell you from the COVID, how important pharmacists are to our province healthcare system. They're just starting to hear about pharmacists now. It's been 2+ years and we've done so much as a profession. People are just starting, maybe getting scratched in a bit of how important the pharmacists are in their daily lives. And we just need to keep pushing forward with that message. Don't give up, don't stop, because the pandemic's over. We have a heck of a start ahead of us, and find your voice and just use it.
Yeah. And so from Rebecca, this notion of zig, when everything in you is telling you to zag, go in new directions, is from Jeff, a really interesting concept of find a mentor, find a sounding board, find people who can help you deal with some of the more paralyzing aspects of imposter syndrome. Christine, you've heard your colleagues on the panel, you've had your own experiences with this. How do you think about imposter syndrome, and what advice do you have for our audience in terms of ways of not making sure that it doesn't become a barrier to leadership?
Yeah, thank you so much. We've all been there, as the panelists are describing this, the sense of how did I find myself in this position? And I can seriously remember putting my name in the hat for a couple of positions where you're reaching. It's, we have that belief that everyone should have stretch goals. So you stretch, and then you kind of look around and say, what have I done? Again, I've stretched myself into this position where, and clearly I remember putting my name in for a few positions. Oh, faculty, I was 2-3 years out of my own program, feeling a little bit vulnerable, and threw my name in. And it was a sense of, they picked me. Oh, wait a second. Now the hard work is really starting. So it's that sense of once you arrive in that spot to just own it, be real in the moment, don't kind of dismiss it, and then that becomes your superpower. It becomes your ability to say, okay, I can still remain humble because I recognize that I'm here for the right purpose. I think both Rebecca and Jeff mentioned that already, that once you go back to why you've taken on this leadership role, and it speaks to your values, your own integrity, others will just fall into place. And I have a personal way of handling this is surround yourself with excellence. Build your team around you. Pick the smartest, the brightest, those who will call out, when you need to be told that maybe you need to be put in your place once in a while. You need everyone like that around you, and listen to them. So they become your bit of your sounding board, but also they keep you balanced. And I think selecting your team around you, of course, is critical, but that excellence will always ground you and keep you focused. Mentors, can't say enough. Of course, I agree, have had multiple mentors throughout my life, but so fortunate that I have two on this panel today. And both Emily and Zubin know that I have picked up the phone and called them for their advice. So when you have those who are willing to impart their wisdom when you're in those perilous moments, I think that helps you again just to stay the course.
Yeah. And so the idea that leadership is a team sport, and that surrounding yourself with the right people, having that right sort of safety buffer around you, so important to managing the worst effects of imposter syndrome. Kiro, what do you think about this issue of imposter syndrome?
I don't know, Zubin. I mean, you brought me to a leadership talk and you put me on it, and then afterwards you sat me next to Christine Donaldson down there, and you're talking to me about imposter syndrome. I feel like you're just sabotaging me. Okay, so I don't know. Over the last 2 years, I've been put in a lot of positions where it's what the heck is going on? Why are people taking my opinion? Why am I the first to think of this? And 1 minute, there's I'm featured on CNN, and then the next minute I have the prime minister thanking me on Twitter, and then all this gas is going around. And then if I go and I meet this regular pharmacist, pharmacy owner in Hamilton, and she tells me, you know what, Kiro, you are very inspirational, and thank you for finally putting to light what pharmacists are doing all along. And then she goes on, we're chatting, and then she starts telling me about how she raises funds and takes some of her own money and then goes down to India and saves children from human trafficking. Some of these girls are as young as 7, and she takes them out of this and gets them homes and healthcare and food, and and immediately I'm just this big. And I think to myself, do I really want to overcome the imposter syndrome? So when you see someone that is just so incredible and so inspirational, and you are surrounded by all these people that you do know for a fact and believe are better than you, is that really a bad thing? In my opinion, no. It can be, obviously, if you choose to let that paralyze you, but in my opinion, I'm naive. I'm exactly like Jeff said, to go from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. That's what I'm all about. So if I'm faced with a situation where there's someone that is so amazing and so inspirational, so much better than me, I just reach higher. And if I don't have this imposter syndrome, then I'm just going to stop evolving. So the question is, do I really want to overcome it?
Fantastic response, Kira. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for some really interesting insights and some very honest discussion that I'm sure our audience has really appreciated. Back to you, Emily.
Great, thank you. So I want to dig in a little bit more, and this is not a specific question to each one of the panelists. Anyone that can answer this that feels that you have something to contribute. Many people, when they think about leadership, really consider leadership kind of en masse as some sort of skill to master, that I'm going to master leadership. But really, when you look at it, what are the specific skills that you think are the key ingredients that are going to help pharmacists assume those leadership roles and make transformative change? What are the things that either you have developed or that you think are the make it or break it skills that a good leader should have and needs to have? And anyone can answer this question from our panel.
I'll jump in there first. Sure, Emily, I think you're right. It is something we're always honing those skills. And I think it's, for me, it's connection, it's connection with others. You need to have the ability to not only listen to where someone is coming from, but to really try to connect to them and on that same level to understand what they're going through. It could be a patient, it could be someone that's a stakeholder, it's someone that you're trying to advocate for. It's having to really get into a really wanting to be in their shoes, understanding, and then that seems to take off as an opportunity then for you to lead in a different way. So I always think it's that one of my favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou, who's a poet that many of us had followed. And it's that people forget what you said, people forget what you do, but they will never forget the way you make them feel. And I think a good leader always will connect with those they're trying to lead so that, again, you get that strength together.
That's great. Thanks for putting that together for us. Anyone else want to jump in on that topic? So what specific skills or qualities or aspects do you think are just essential in leadership?
If I can actually turn that around and not be as specific on a certain leadership skill, I'm a big believer in strength finders. And I don't know if any of you have done it. There's many different tests out there. I think all of us are very different and diverse in our strengths and our opportunities. We don't call them weaknesses. And I think it's important to actually be self-aware of what your strengths are. Because if you know what your strengths are, you can actually leverage those strengths to benefit yourself. And to what Christine said, surround yourself with those people that actually fills the gaps that you have opportunity areas in. Because if you hone in on those areas that, yes, we all have something we can do better in. But I think leading with your strengths and knowing what your strength is, if it's analytical, what is it that you can leverage your analytical skills to be able to develop further and hone in on those leadership skills and push that forward. If it's connection, that could be it too. The second piece is I do agree with Christine. I do think we need to get outside of the circle that we're used to. There is some discomfort there to get outside. And I think I told a few of you that story where I met a couple of pharmacy students at an event where the former dean, Christine, was bringing them there, and they all sat in the corner and they wouldn't come out and talk to anybody. And then I said, okay, you all need to come out and talk to somebody, at least one person, and introduce yourself. So that is something within yourself, and you need to be able to actually build that network, especially, post-pandemic in the social media world that we're in, and with the amount of competition that's out there. Everybody now has a master's or a PharmD or a PhD. So that's my take on it.
Thanks, Rebecca. Anyone else? Jeff, Kiro?
I'll just jump in. Team building skills, as I mentioned earlier, we're all really imposters. It's putting together all the imposters together to come up with a front that you could move forward with the leadership. Two other skills that I think people can develop, it's more traits, is confidence. You have to show confidence that what you're striving for will inspire others to follow. And you have to have a small measure of conflict resolution, because you will be challenged every step of the way during any form of leadership, and you have to be able to manage that in a positive fashion. And I think we all have that within us, and it's all experience. And I mentioned earlier, getting that mentor in place to help you take to the next level is very, very key.
Great. And as I say, we don't have to have every single person answer this question. So I'm going to pass you on to Zubin for our, Kira, do you
I
want
was
to say?
just going to mention one little thing. I think it might be silly, but it's something that I teach all my students, and it is people will mirror what they see. So it's very important that as soon as you are in a situation where you're going to start a conversation, and that's like the ABC of leadership, is that first conversation you have is that you have a smile on and a big loud hello and being very cheery as soon as you meet anybody and everybody, because that's going to set the tone for the rest of the conversation, and it's going to set the tone for yourself as well. Okay, because if you just jump in there with a nice, strong, happy hello, as silly and as simple as this sounds, things are going to go in the right direction. Okay, if you're going to look disheveled and completely like, not together and like scared, you're in for a wild ride, and things are just not going to work out for you. And I make sure that I do this in my pharmacy with literally everybody that walks through the door as soon as they walk through the door, because then there's going to be no conflict. Okay, but if I look angry and tired and scared, the sky's the limit. And that's something that I teach every student that I get.
Yeah, such a good point, because people are looking to the leader to set that tone, right? And the leader has that ability to do that very easily by how they act and how they react and interact with everyone else around that room. So really good point. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're getting questions already from the audience, which is wonderful. Keep those questions coming. And one flavor of questionings that we're starting to see from the audience relates to something that all of you have talked about already to some degree, and that is the value and impact of mentors that you have had. And we're getting questions from the audience around, yeah, I know mentorship is great, mentorship is important. How do you find a mentor? How do you find the right mentor? How do you ask somebody to be a mentor? What are some of the practicalities of finding, keeping, and benefiting from a mentor? Jeff, you were one of the first people in the conversation today that really brought this up. Let me turn it over to you to get your perspectives on, especially perhaps if you're a little bit more introverted, how do you find a mentor and get them to agree to be your mentor?
Well, I think you have to just start developing a friendly relationship with them before you get to the mentor stage. And I want to point out, your mentor, to make you a better pharmacy leader, doesn't have to be a pharmacist. I want to point that out. You don't necessarily have to look for a pharmacist to help you along your way. You already have those skills from your experience and education. But just having regular conversations and being very inquisitive with the person, just asking their own experiences. I know many people, especially those that make great mentors, love to tell you stories, or they love to share what they've been through. And you'll develop over time whether or not you feel this person can actually help you along the path you're taking. And over time, you'll develop that mentor relationship without really coming out and asking. You'll just develop it's like a friendship to some extent. But it's a longer process, but it doesn't have to be as spelled out and written down that this is my mentor. I think that'll develop naturally over time. But just reaching out in your community to start with, reaching out through your associations that you're connected to, through the Alumni Association at U of T. I would imagine Waterloo has one too, but I'm more of a Toronto-focused guy, But,
and aren't we happy about that?
But yeah, I mean, and just making those connections and having those conversations. I'm sure any pharmacist, is used to taking a phone call from complete strangers and talking about their healthcare. There's no reason at all why they wouldn't pick up a phone call from a colleague and just have a chat of their past experiences. So don't be afraid of mentorship. That's probably the easiest part. The harder part is transforming their knowledge into your everyday and incorporating how you do things.
Yep. Great suggestion. So Jeff's sort of spoken about the importance of getting out there, joining associations, joining activities and meeting people and networking. And maybe, Kira, I'll ask you this question. You are an international pharmacy graduate. So not only have you managed coming to Canada as an adult. You're also navigating a new professional context without having gone to the same schools that all of us have gone to. Do you have any advice in particular for international pharmacy graduates around this issue of mentorship? If they don't necessarily have some of the baked in advantages of having gone to the same schools and some of the similar experiences that U of T or Waterloo grads may have had?
I don't know. Like, I feel that you need to first find what is it that you're lacking, like, or what is it that you need to be mentored for. And then the easiest way is through social media, LinkedIn, by looking at different people that are doing different initiatives. If someone is really all about, diabetes, and you're super bad in diabetes, then you could reach out to this person, shoot them a message, see if you could have a sit down with them, even have a Zoom call. It doesn't have to be in person. It doesn't have to be formal, like Jeff mentioned, but just even a few conversations could add to you. You could go and I've had that multiple times where, people would reach out to me. It's like, I want to see how you do this, or how, you interact and how you carry yourself in conversation. Can I come shadow you for a shift? Okay. That's totally okay. And I think the good thing about pharmacists in general is that they're very open to teach. And so I really don't think that you're going to have a tough time, even if you're not from the same faculty. You shouldn't have that hard of a time to find a mentor. And even through the IPG program, you will come across other classmates that have certain strength that you don't have. And down the road, you could easily reach out to them as well.
Great advice. Rebecca, you have had a lot of different experiences, and in the sort of area of mentoring, this aspect of networking, again, has come up in the questions in our discussion. It's really, really important, especially for people who might see themselves more as introverts and not necessarily social butterflies who find it easy to just, chat up everybody that they meet. What advice would you give to our audience in terms of networking, techniques or tactics or approaches, especially to overcome, perhaps some shyness or introversion, and actually get out there and build the networks we need in order to find the mentors that we deserve?
Yeah, actually, believe it or not, I am an introvert, or was. I was an introvert in school, very much so. And, finding a network or a mentor out there, it's about actually connecting with people. And Christine touched upon it. And when you talk to somebody, it's about really picking up on the body language or what you're talking about to see what is the person interested in. And I'm a firm believer, when you're talking, connecting, you got to understand what's a value of the person that you're talking to, what's interesting to them, what is the value you're offering to that person, and what's an ability for you to be able to connect on something like it could be something about dogs. We love dogs. It could be about the weather. It could be about a sport. So I think it's important to find ways, and I do that a lot with our stakeholders and customers, and even folks within the organization. What are the things that we can find that's of commonality that we can touch on? Christine, I didn't know you were from Windsor. So already I can make a connection with her offline and say, Christine, let's talk about Windsor, because I grew up in Windsor. And so, Forest Lake School, Riverside High. So that's a very simple thing. And that already starts the conversation from A to B to C. And, and once you start going, then you forget about being shy because you've just connected with the individual. So to me, that is probably the first step. Find something that's very comfortable and familiarized to you, and find what are the ways that you actually connect with the person across from you.
I think this event should be co-sponsored by the Windsor Riverside High Alumni Association as well, apparently. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Some really important insights there. Christine, last word to you about mentorship, and in particular, this notion of keeping mentors and giving back to your mentors. So instead of just perhaps taking from them, what advice do you have in terms of ways of nurturing a mentorship relationship so it's not simply a one-way transaction, but something that's actually meaningful to the mentor?
I think that's a great question, because as you said, you feel in some ways that you're drawing from their expertise, and it becomes that sense of, oh, will they take my call after a while? I keep begging the favor too often. And so I think what you do is you add value. You add value to that relationship, and maybe a unique perspective you have to offer, and maybe something that you're working on that you're very excited about, you want to share. There might be some like common intersection of the work that you're both involved in. And so it's just, it's almost like delivering a little of that little nugget or that ability, kind of like Rebecca was saying, maybe so you have those other intersections of interest. Well, this is something that then gets on that, hopefully that professional level, or maybe I just read this great book on creativity, and I want to share it with you. So I think of it almost when I'm working with students, I always say to them, I'll learn as much from you as you'll learn from me. And why is that? Because we come from different places, but I might have a different experience than them, but they have so much to offer in their lived experience. So again, if you come at it from the point of sharing your wealth of knowledge or your wealth of experience, or even something that I read that really resonated with me, and I want to share it with you. Again, that tends to be a win-win on all sides.
Wise words from all of our panelists on the importance of mentorship. Thank you so much, and back over to you, Emily.
Thank you. I love listening to everyone's answers to that, and I do think that relationship of a mentor and a mentee is often very energizing for the mentor, because you're really seeing things through fresh eyes, and those individuals often have all of the enthusiasm that you had when you first entered the profession, and you sometimes need to be reminded about that when you're mired in all the daily work that you're doing as a leader. So at this point, I'm going to turn the focus on Jeff and say, Jeff, you've had experience as a member of provincial parliament, which many people would think of as a somewhat non-traditional career path for a pharmacist to take. What I want to ask is, what did you learn about leadership in that environment, and how did you take it? How did it take you to where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, thanks very much. The whole experience of my time as a parliamentarian, there's something learning each and every day, because you had to in order to do your job properly. I think the key items that I learned over the years was listening is number one. Hearing what the issue is and what others are saying about that issue really helps you refine on the path that you want to take. And you need to reach out and work with others, even if you don't really agree or they don't agree with you, which I think as we transform the role of the pharmacist, there are going to be those naysayers or those that push back. Understanding why they're pushing back and finding a solution to deal with that issue, I think would really help move along the changes that are going to be necessary. And don't ever be afraid. I found over the years is to step back and challenge your own beliefs and thoughts, and to make sure you're heading down that path, to reconfirm why you believe your path of leadership and change is where you want to go. That'll only help you derive more confidence and courage in your own conviction as you move forward. And last is the main thing I learned is and I say it numerous times, is staying positive. Once you hit that negative, it's so easy to creep into while you're undergoing change, or at your workplaces, you get inundated with so much going on around you. If you get mired in negative thoughts and feelings, you can't see the forest for the trees. You can't make that next step in knowing that you are making a difference and things are changing, albeit slowly, but you keep that positive charge going on, and those that are working with you, those that are looking for your leadership, will follow positivity as opposed to a negative tone.
Yeah, such a good point. It really brings it back to what Carol was saying previously with regards to setting that tone. If you set that positive tone, I think you have a really positive impact on the team and how it works together. Ruben.
Okay, next question is aimed specifically at Rebecca and Christine. Both of you have amassed incredible experience in leadership positions across very many different environments. You are both women. You are both mothers, and you have had to navigate complex corporate and practice environments while juggling motherhood responsibilities. Could you speak to some of those experiences and perhaps highlight some of the ways you have been able to manage both motherhood responsibilities and professional aspirations, and provide maybe some suggestions to our audience in terms of how younger women who are listening may think about juggling this? I'm also going to ask you, Emily, who also juggled this perhaps at a different time than Christine and Rebecca did, about some of perhaps the unique challenges and opportunities that women seeking leadership roles may face. Let me start with you first, Rebecca.
Thank you, Subin. You're completely right. I mean, it's a very different type of leadership when you have kids. I have two little ones when I first started my career, and it is difficult to raise children at the same time when you want to actually have a career on your own and come back and, especially now actually in the pandemic where you want to have some sort of work-life balance. And, you want to be able to give everything you can to your job, but you also have a family at home that you have to deal with. I don't have a magic answer on how I was able to necessarily juggle it. I had great support from my husband. I think that's also very important. I think in this day and age, it's not just about women only or men having a career. I think sometimes I've also now see couples that they actually take turns. This is the time now for the women to actually progress in the career. And I was very lucky that my husband actually did help and support me in terms of raising the children and helping out. I think the other piece is also the roles that we take on. The current role I have, which is sales and marketing, if it was 10 years ago, it's all males. And, and never mind somebody of color. So I think things are changing. And it has gotten better and easier, and the expectation of what people think certain sex should be in certain roles is very, very different now 10 years from now. And I think we all have a role to play in terms of actually, in my opinion, if everybody sees more women in those type of leadership roles, it's going to become normal, and it's going to be something that our daughters, when they grow up, they're going to have more chances one day. So that's just my thoughts.
Excellent. Christine, some of your thoughts and experiences to share with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. We always talk about, the balance, and everyone who has a family work balance is dealing with this, trying to sort out. And I don't know if it's really the way I like to characterize it, because if you think there's balance, you think there's some kind of magic formula where you're in the zone, or you've achieved that perfect balance. It's more of a moving target of trying to look at those, as Rebecca was saying, like some of the competing demands on your time, and just make intelligent choices, ensuring that you're not completely looking at one area of your life, your career over your family. It should be making sure that you're taking choices to make those work together as much as you can. I do agree that today's opportunities are expanding. There's many more role models, and I think, again, you become a role model for either your own family and children, or those who are younger coming through the ranks. And I think the more that people can identify with someone that is similar or like you, then it gives them that courage to also try to get outside of their norm. For example, even recently in the last 5 years of my career, I was flabbergasted to find out that procurement, I'm in this world of procurement, very male dominated. I had no idea. It's something that, unfortunately, in the company that I'm at, Health Pro, we have most of our executive leadership team is female. So it was a little bit surprising to me to find that a lot of the that level of professionalism is similar. That there's a bit of a slow moving change that's coming. So again, it shows you, don't be afraid to jump into a role that maybe is a little bit different than what you maybe pictured for yourself or others saw for you, because again, you can carve your own path. And I think the more that you do that and show that courage and that little bit of fear that goes along with it, then others see that they too can take some of those chances and those risks.
Emily, you were climbing the corporate ladder in hospital pharmacy. You ended your career as a vice president at Canada's largest hospital, and you did so at a time where family-friendly policies were far less frequent, where women in senior administrative roles in enormous public sector institutions were far less prominent. And as you sort of reflect back on your time and think about your current role as leader in residence, what advice would you give to young women who see the fact that I want to have a family as a reason to not want to take on leadership roles?
Thanks, Zubin. Yeah, I have to say, reflecting back, I remember when I was a young pharmacist going to the States for a giant hospital pharmacy conference and looking down at this giant auditorium and seeing pretty well 98% of those people were male. And it was a little bit frightening because it made me really think about, well, how do I fit into this whole context? And how do I link and connect with these people? And a lot of things have changed since then. And I have to say that I've been very lucky, as Rebecca has said similar to me. I've had a really supportive husband and partner in making things happen. You know, this was an individual who he chose to work night shifts so that he could be home during the day with our kids so that I could be focused on at work. So it's very helpful if you have a lot of support in place for yourself to be able to do many things. But at the same time, you know, you shouldn't let that stop you. You know, if you want to have kids and you want to do well in your career, you can have both. And work-life balance, as Christine says, is not always 50-50. You know, there are times when, you know, 90% of your time and attention has to focus on work, simply because that's what is needed at that time in your career and in your work. And there are other times when, you know, it's not that, where you can spend 50% of your focus and attention on work and 50% on your family. And work-life balance is the flexibility of understanding that that is an always changing scenario, and you can change the way you interact with work as well as with your family life to make that happen. It's whatever works for you at that time and what is important to you at that time.
Right. So the idea of managing your expectations, but also taking control and seizing the power you have to make those adjustments as you need to.
For sure.
Thank you to all three of you for your perspectives on this. And over to you, Emily, for our next panelist question.
Thanks. So I'm going to focus this question to Christine. So Christine, you've really had significant experience in the field of advocacy, and I'd like to explore that a little bit. Can you speak about the intersection between leadership and advocacy, particularly when working in different environments, such as the public and private sector?
Yeah, thank you. Again, so humbling to even, you know, have had some of these opportunities in my career to, as you said, be at the forefront of some, you know, really important, you know, change or as an outcome. You know, you always think about, you know, what's going to be your legacy in your career. And sometimes, as Jeff was speaking, it comes from failure. It comes from where the system has failed, and you need to advocate for positive change to occur. And so that was a very pivotal moment for me. Several years ago, I was involved in a major adverse event with 290 patients at my hospital were affected by a chemotherapy underdosing incident, and yet all of the system change that came from that experience was, you know, that's the legacy. How will you now take that on as a personal challenge to say, what role can I have to advocate for change? So we saw things happen in hospitals with accreditation and some advancements and how their standards were being met, and maybe it gave some attention actually to some hospital environments that maybe weren't getting their due course. At the same time, in the private sector, so now I represent a company that interacts with the public sector, but we are like a private nonprofit. And so it's fascinating to me because, again, as long as we come with the same value and the same purpose, which is the greater good, you're looking for how patient care can overall improve. And so in this case, it's more of like on a national scope, but you're dealing with the federal government. You know, I have many interactions with Health Canada, and not only on the critical drug reserve and trying to maintain, a pandemic stockpile, but you're also talking about, well, how can we make sure it's fair, that it's equitable, that we're getting out those critical drugs and products to the patients that need them. And when you're also at the table with that same kind of belief system of, we can do better. We've learned and we know where the system wasn't serving us well. The advocacy kind of falls into place because you're almost speaking the same language. There's this common ground. We were talking about it earlier, about with students and mentors, you find a common ground, and then you have that opportunity to move things forward, and in powerful ways, because you now have an audience that is listening, and you can really provide maybe an avenue. I'm sure Jeff has many stories. The advocacy at the government level, they have so many things coming at them. I'm fascinated how they can keep anything straight. So if you can deliver a very focused, concise opportunity, and then lead the charge, help to lead the charge. And one example I can use is barcoding. It was something that we've been waiting for regulation, and something that we've now taken it kind of on and said, we can make a difference. We don't really need the regulation to come as the reason to change. So often advocacy is almost this building, you have this burning platform, this coalition of very like-minded, passionate professionals. And, again, just so blessed that I've been able to be at the forefront of some of that very positive energy and take it to the next level.
Thanks, Christine. I have to say, I remember the time when that chemo underdosing event occurred, and being extremely impressed at how professional you were in providing leadership through that, because it impacted your hospital. And many of us heard something was happening. We didn't know what, and we didn't know whether we needed to do anything as leaders within our own settings to help our own patients. So, thank you for that leadership and the openness that you had. There was no finger pointing. It was really taking that stance of ensuring that the information was out there with the patient in mind, patient safety in mind. So thank you for that. That's great.
So our final formal question for the panel tonight goes to you, Kiro. When people ask, how was your pandemic? You have the opportunity to answer, I kind of became a bit of a media celebrity during the pandemic. Those of us, especially in the Toronto area, became very accustomed to seeing you on the news and the newspaper, etc. Can you tell us a little bit about that kind of leadership, about some of the responsibilities, the opportunities, and some of the ways you approach being, rightly or wrongly, randomly or deliberately, appointed by the media as a voice of the profession? How did you manage that stress, that opportunity, and that responsibility?
So first off, I'm sorry that you guys had to see my face that many times. It's I almost became like the guy that like buys your gold. Like that's how often it just, it's annoying at points. Anyways, so I guess it's not as difficult for me because I'm basically the same person all the way through. So if you've been my student or if you've worked with me, you know that I'm the same guy on TV, that I'm the same guy with the patients, the same guy with the staff, and you kind of see what you get. Like I say what I do and I do what I say, kind of like Jeff's quote. I probably misquoted you. I'm sorry, Jeff. But like I'm the same person through and through. Like sometimes I've done these interviews like mid shift as I'm working and I'm just talking to the camera crew and just like going about my day. So it hasn't been that difficult for me personally. I'm very loud-mouthed and that kind of helps. But I guess it was a good opportunity overall for pharmacists to finally showcase what they've been doing all along in silence. And I think that was one good thing that came out of all of the sort of media hype over the pandemic, is that people finally began to understand what's going on behind these counters. And I can probably list for you 100 other pharmacists that did way more than me over this pandemic, and they've done it without anybody knowing. But at least it got out there that people finally started to see what pharmacists are bringing to the table and the type of sacrifices that they've done all along, again, behind closed doors, if you will.
Great. And thank you very much for that answer. Thank you to all of our panelists for a really interesting discussion. Over the last hour and 15 minutes, we have been collecting and sorting through lots of questions that the audience has been submitting. I'd encourage the audience to keep on submitting those questions. And in the remaining 15 minutes we have tonight, I'd like to go through a selection of those questions and start a broader discussion. And strangely, one of the more commonly asked questions tonight isn't for any of you, it's actually for me. And that question is, what is the University of Toronto doing to develop leadership skills in students? And how can U of T extend these development opportunities to the alumni community and others? Thank you for asking that question. And let me tell you a little bit about what U of T is doing in terms of the leadership space. We have actually identified that leadership development is a significant gap in our curriculum. Ever since Jeff was in school, close to 30 years ago, we have really oriented our curriculum towards a clinical focus. And in the process, we have frankly neglected some of the issues of management, leadership, and entrepreneurship. I am happy to report this is something that we have now identified. Our just launched faculty academic plan for the next 5-year period has put front and center management, leadership, and entrepreneurship education as a focus for what we as a faculty intend to do. One of the early initiatives of that is sitting with us tonight. We have developed a new Leader in Residence program. Emily Musing is our inaugural Leader in Residence, and this is a way for us to recognize that as professors, as researchers, academics, we don't really have a lot of real world experience in this area, but we have networks and wonderfully generous alumni like Emily and all of you who are willing to volunteer their time with us, share their experience with students, contribute to our curriculum, and actually help us to design new courses that we hope will be offered to students and ultimately as continuing education to all of you out there as well. In the last 5 years, we have also launched something called the Pharmacy Business Plan Competition. And this is a way for students to hone their entrepreneurial skills and spirits. Students in small groups develop business pitches and deliver them in a Dragon's Den kind of format. The winning team actually gets real money to try to implement their project. And it's a way of instilling a sense of entrepreneurship in our students. We are really interested in finding out more about how we can help our students, but also what you as our alumni, as members of the pharmacy community, want, need, and hope we can do. You've come to this event tonight. If you would like more of these kinds of events, if there are specific kinds of courses that you are interested in, if there are some specific initiatives the Center for Practice Excellence or the Office of Alumni Relations is able to help coordinate, let us know. That's the sort of information we need to help answer that question. The final thing I will say is that the faculty about 7 years ago implemented Canada's first combined PharmD MBA program. It's a way of students receiving both a clinical degree and a business degree in 5 years rather than in 6 years if both degrees are taken separately. And it's also a new educational offering. We have lots of ideas, but we really want your input, your ideas, and give us a sense of what would help you to develop as leaders, managers, and entrepreneurs in pharmacy and beyond it. Thank you so much for that question.
And Zubin, I just want to jump in as well to say that I'm sure that there are people in the audience that are in leadership positions now. So my challenge to you is not only as an audience to come to the faculty and let us know what we can do to help you develop leadership skills, but also if you are in a leadership position, how can you become more involved in the faculty in actually creating that type of a leadership stream and support for people that are interested in leadership?
Yeah. And a great person to contact about this would be Emily, who, as one of her leader in residence projects, is actually, this is exactly the kind of thing that she is helping the faculty get our heads around. Please do contact us. Give back to your profession, give back to the students, and share your expertise. Our next question is a bit of a springboard on this, but this is for all of our panelists. And since all of you are alumni of the University of Toronto at various times and generations, what are your thoughts about your experience in the curriculum as part of your professional training in terms of your exposure to leadership, management, entrepreneurship kinds of skills and concepts? Let me start, I guess, with Christine.
So we're talking about going back to the 1990s here. Okay, this is my 30th year reunion this year. I just want to bring that forward. I think it was not that it was limited. I think it was more narrow in scope than hopefully it will be today and into the future. I can remember having some presentations from, some of industry, some of our larger banner stores, but there was also some practitioners who were really trying to carve out some unique, patient counseling and some sort of, more forward-thinking ways of delivering care. So I think what I'm excited to hear is that we're opening those doors and broadening the horizons. I think many of us in our walks of life today would be, I didn't think I would be here exactly this phase of my career, but it's showing that, being open to opportunities as they present themselves and maybe taking a risk, as we talked about earlier, gets you to a different place. Staying safe and comfortable isn't always going to move you out into those different ranges of expressing yourself and learning. So I would hope that as Emily's taking on some of this and the curriculum's changing, that we show diversity in some of the leadership roles, maybe bigger than pharmacy even. I think, taking your pharmacist knowledge and then being advocates for change in health and more preventative health, being again that step in front of rather than on the how do we deal with our patient care model as it is today.
Great, thank you. Rebecca, let me ask you, if we asked you to redesign our pharmacy curriculum and ensure students are graduating with the skills and confidence and knowledge they need to be leaders, managers, and entrepreneurs, what are the things that we should be prioritizing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think just based on what you just described about the work you and Emily are doing, I think it's a great, you're on the right direction. And so I think about this, I think, and maybe this sounds a little bit biased just because of the sector I currently work in, but if I remember back when I was in school, I don't remember there was a lot of exposure to the industry. And had I known, I would have realized I had no idea. There's so much stuff you can do in industry, from regulatory to medical affairs to quality control to government lobbying. There's just so much stuff you can do, but there wasn't that exposure, and I'm not sure why. And I do work with other faculties as well on collaborations like engineering and so forth. And maybe a question, maybe back to the both of you: is there an opportunity for doing more with the pharmaceutical industry, given the fact your work is in drugs? And I say this because what was interesting is the company I currently work for, I report into what we call Europe, Canada, the region. Most of the CEOs there, including our current CEO globally, are pharmacists. And I think because I don't know, there's a closer relationship, and these are CEOs, are pharmacists, which is absolutely, I think, incredible. And you don't see that as much in Canada. And so I wonder if there could be a potential for further closeness, collaboration, and ability to work closer with the industry and tap into a little bit more of that. No different than Waterloo when they work with the private sector like Google and so forth. Just a thought.
Oh, and we know your number, Rebecca. So thank you for making that suggestion. There will be follow-up. Kiro, you are a graduate of our IPG program. And of course, the IPG program is a very compressed introduction to Canadian pharmacy practice, very focused on clinical skills. What might be missing in the IPG program, or what supports may IPGs benefit from And from the students who aren't IPGs that you have precepted over the years, what does our curriculum need to do to really build that leadership skill set in the profession?
Unfortunately, in the IPG program, it's too brief to, I guess, do the clinical, which is absolutely necessary, along with the OSCE scenarios and all that stuff, and then add leadership to that. I guess maybe if you had some business plans or it like as part of the course, like having the students being exposed to some business plans or developing business plans for a pharmacy or a pharmacy project, perhaps, that may help. I've taught a lot of students from U of T, APPEs and EPEs throughout the years, and I don't know, like I feel that to a big degree, there's a lot of indirect messaging for them to kind of stay in their lane and not think outside the box. I don't want to say messaging as much as, like everything has to be so organized and so neat and like so in the box. You get what I'm saying? So when they come to me in my pharmacy and suddenly everything is completely obliterated and irrational, they're kind of taken back. And they're like, I didn't know I could do that. I was like, damn right you can do that. Okay. That's in the patient's best interest. You do that and you do that right now. Okay. So there has to be a way to, I guess, push students out of their comfort zone in more occasions, indirectly. It doesn't have to be like great that you're planning on doing courses, okay, but if someone proposes a solution within the courses that are already there that is a bit out of the box, accept it and encourage it. Yeah, I don't know if that added more questions than answers.
No, it's a great point. And Jeff, I'd like to ask you, from your diverse background and experience, what should a pharmacy curriculum do to encourage pharmacy students to not stick to their lane, to be willing to take risks? All the things that all of you have talked about today. What are some things that we as educators should really be thinking about or trying to actually to maybe push students in ways that they might not necessarily be really comfortable in?
Yeah, that's a great question. Heading someone and pushing them towards, I'll throw out their political engagement. That is one thing nobody is taught while they're at school, but is so imperative to really driving change through regulation and or payment. I hear that all the time. Pharmacists are always getting more of an expanded scope, but there's no money in dollars following behind it. And I got to say, one of the biggest failures that I see in our profession is the engagement level at the local level. Everybody comes for the OPA Pharmacist Day at the legislature. That's one day you get 15 minutes with a handful of MPPs. They get your thing, they read about it, and they put it down. But I can tell you, there's value in making a relationship with your local elected official, sitting down with them twice a year, just to let them know pharmacists exist and what the main issues are, so that when they meet in caucus, when they get ideas from above about policy and how it's heading down, that actually the idea of pharmacist is in their mind. I would love to see the faculties, both Waterloo and U of T, is push their students on a project of one sort or another of political engagement with local members, not necessarily the government in power or the leaders of the opposition, but the local members surrounding their colleges and universities, to get that message out, because that's a very good way to make changes, because caucus can make changes to policy more than, say, government and the think tanks behind them bring forward. So if you can push them down that, and that's just one path, political engagement, because that's what I've been involved with. But there's other avenues that you could push a student or a group and make a group project out and make them figure out a solution to that problem.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Is advocacy, actually political advocacy in particular, Is that a skill that can be learned, that can be taught, that ought to be part of a pharmacy program? And can you help us with that, Jeff?
Well, of course, no. I mean, I think the best example of political advocacy is Doris Grinspan with RNAO.
Mm-hmm.
She has the respect of the government and all the opposition parties. She has her nurses are in the face, in the constituency and at Queen's Park of all the MPPs. And when there's not one instance of any type of policy that comes forward that a politician goes, you have the nurses, nurses. I would love someday to see the pharmacists come top of mind. And we can do that, but we need to get involved as individual pharmacists in our local areas. And I think the faculty can play a role in putting that seed in people's minds, because I mean, when you're graduating university and heading out, you have so much hope and inspiration that you can make a change in this world, and you can. I don't want to say you can't, but you can. I think the faculty could really play a big role in that.
Thank you, Jeff. And if this is the sort of programming that you and the audience are interested in, please let us know. Organizing events such as this is really essential, and some of these topics are things we can discuss further. We are out of time, unfortunately, and I'm sure we could discuss a lot of this for a lot longer, but for now, please join me in thanking our panelists, Christine, Kiro, Rebecca, and Jeff, those who helped organize tonight's events, Susan, Claire, and Annalise, and Emily as my co-host. Thank you for joining us for this really important discussion, and we look forward to seeing you at our next virtual event. Thank you, and good night.